Joy in learning and joy from learning. Although deriving happiness in one's studies is important as part of the process of learning, it is not enough. Happiness is not simply a stage in learning or in spiritual practice, but rather it is the most essential part and the goal of one's studies. If one understands the true nature of happiness, one will discern that study or training is in itself a development of happiness in order for the student or practitioner to be truly happy. The genuine development of happiness requires a fulfillment of spiritual qualities which are present in those people who are accomplished. I've written several books on this subject of happiness as the goal of education or of spiritual training. Let us review some of the material in these books. The true purpose of education is to provide people with happiness. It is not enough for people to enjoy their studies. Education also needs to lead people to happiness. People then dwell in a normal state of happiness. Moreover, the learning process itself is also endowed with happiness. Does modern education provide people with happiness, or does it make people simply hunger and yearn for happiness? An incorrect form of education leads people to discontentment. It becomes an instrument for sucking happiness out of people and making them thirst for it. The further one studies in such a defective system of education, the greater is one's thirst for true happiness. One is in want of happiness while studying, and one graduates from this system with yearning. One then rushes ahead in order to find personal happiness, competing for it and creating suffering and hardship for others. When people who are deprived of happiness experience suffering, they vent their frustrations out on others and seize whatever happiness they can find for themselves. If children are taught in such a harmful way, upon completion of their studies, they will seek to maximize their own personal happiness. In this modern, technically developed age, one sees how people are caught up in the pursuit of happiness to the extent that they no longer have time for others. They are in a constant state of want and pursuit of happiness, and they keep expecting it to arrive in the future. The thirst for happiness is rampant throughout the entire society, including in family households, schools, and workplaces. The mind state of happiness deprivation is widespread, apparent throughout society. For this reason, we must emphasize that true education makes people happy and teaches people to look for happiness in the correct ways. Those people who have passed a correct system of education are able to solve problems, dispel suffering, and establish themselves in happiness. They cultivate themselves in order to reach more refined forms of happiness, and they share their happiness with others in a wide-ranging way. People who suffer from some form of problem often vent their frustration on others, and although this is an attempt on their part to find some kind of ease, their actions cause harm to others and to society. This includes those children who have some kind of difficulty and consequently act out in negative ways. On the contrary, those people who abide in happiness tend to share their joys with others, even when there is no direct intention to do so, thus to increase happiness in the world. We need to increase happiness in individuals. This corresponds with the Buddha's aim in relation to society. Abhaya Pajahang Sukhang Lokang. To create and abide in a world that is happy, free from oppression. This is our task as human beings, to create a happier world, to reduce oppression, to offer mutual support and assistance, and to abide in collective, lasting happiness. Despite the glut of consumable objects, happiness is on the wane. One of the consequences of the inability to know what is enough and the constant pursuit of happiness is that people develop the characteristic of being prone to suffering and find it increasingly difficult to be happy. Compare this with children. Most children from the early days before they could walk laugh openly, smile with delight, and are easily amused. Little things that they obtain or see give them happiness. But as people grow up, they find it more and more difficult to find happiness. As mentioned above, those things that at one time provided happiness are now considered boring, leading to indifference and a lack of enthusiasm. In order to be happy, things must accord with a long list of desires, preconditions, and yet these people still don't experience real gratification. They chase after things without ever reaching their destination. It becomes more and more difficult to satisfy them. When it becomes increasingly difficult for people to be happy, they also become more easily agitated. Before going without certain things, living with certain inconveniences, and being required to perform certain tasks was not a problem. These situations didn't cause suffering. Later on, they may become well off, own an abundance of things, and be extremely comfortable. They can order others to do their own work. The only muscle in the body that gets exercised is the index finger, but they may become attached to this ease and convenience. If they lack anything, if something doesn't arrive exactly on time, if they don't get what they want, or they must do something requiring effort, all of these situations become a source of suffering. They thus become more prone to suffering, and they accumulate suffering. This runs counter to true spiritual development. If one is engaged in proper spiritual development, as one gets older, one should be more proficient at being happy. One should be able to increasingly generate internal happiness, and one should find it easier to be happy and less prone to suffering. Those who are developing spiritually must be simultaneously developing in happiness. The happiness must be increasing. Within the ordinary sphere of human living situations or responsibilities, they should feel confident about experiencing happiness. They can make the claim to others, "Don't waste your time trying to make me unhappy. You won't succeed." These days, however, the reverse seems to be occurring. People seem to find it increasingly difficult to discover happiness, and they are unnaturally more prone to suffering. Many children in the IT age seem to have this trait. One cause for this is that the upsurge in technological advances permits a quick gratification of desire in regard to consuming material things, and it increases material comfort. The drawback is that people become more easily jaded, or else they feel they cannot live without these comforts. In order to feel satisfied, they must acquire things as quickly as they desire them. The real reason, however, is an inadequate and incorrect spiritual practice. The result is that instead of technological growth helping to promote true happiness, it ends up crippling one's ability to experience happiness. People then become incapable of experiencing true happiness. This is what happens when people deal with technology incorrectly. They fail to derive the true benefit from it. Instead of receiving its positive effects, they receive its negative ones. The greater the abundance of material things, and the greater the ease and convenience in society, the more important it becomes for people to train their minds and develop the ability to experience happiness. If people simply get caught up in pursuing pleasure from external objects, they will find it increasingly difficult to be happy. At the same time, they will neglect the training and an increased capability to experience happiness. Besides squandering an opportunity to develop themselves, they may eventually be incapable of any form of happiness. For this reason, give heed to developing one's capability to experience happiness. Otherwise, there will be no end to problems. People's own search for happiness will be futile, and their internal suffering will intensify. Mutual oppression in society will increase, and the world will become a more troubled place. There will be no hope for peace if one develops happiness correctly. However, all internal dilemmas will be resolved. Various spiritual factors will be activated and set into place because in a correct spiritual practice, the vital spiritual factors are naturally linked and integrated. Sense desire, the desire for material objects, is thus fraught with danger, and it is the cause for various kinds of wrongdoing. People desire sense pleasure within a system of preconditions. See the earlier material on this subject, which is linked to the material here. The result is that the extent and range of immoral conduct is amplified. This is how craving operates within a system of preconditions, in which people seek desirable objects by avoiding or by half-heartedly conforming to the direct processes of nature. Our responsibility is thus to help people to develop wholesome desire and to integrate human laws with natural laws. This gives an outline of the advantages and disadvantages of happiness. The essential point is that one applies liberating wisdom, Nitsarana Panya, in regard to all forms of happiness, beginning with sense pleasure until one reaches the freedom from mental defilement. While experiencing happiness, be vigilant and know moderation. This way one will remain strong and avoid mental weakness.